It was supposed to be a normal October evening, pumpkins glowing, kids laughing, the whole street buzzing with the kind of warmth only small town Halloween could bring. But then she arrived. And within her first 10 minutes as HOA president, she declared something so shocking, so outrageous, the entire neighborhood froze in disbelief. People didn't know it yet. But this woman wasn't just here to lead the HOA. She wanted control. Absolute control. And Halloween was only the beginning. What happened next pushed our calm community into a boiling war we never thought we'd face. She showed up from out of state, smiling like she owned the place, shaking hands, pretending to be friendly. But the moment she got the HOA keys, the mask cracked. She sent an emergency notice banning Halloween decorations effective immediately. No pumpkins, no lights, not even a paper ghost in a window. She called the holiday immoral, dangerous, spiritually corrupt, and said anyone who defied her would face behavior fines and written warnings. The problem? Our HOA had never issued fines before, ever. The last president treated this place like a family barbecue, but she walked in like a self-appointed dictator. Within 48 hours, she installed cameras on her porch, pointed at multiple houses, claiming it was for community safety. She patrolled the sidewalks like a security guard, taking photos of kids chalking pumpkins on the pavement. She even confronted elderly neighbors, demanding they remove harmless yard lights. She insisted were witchcraft symbols. The tension spread like wildfire. People whispered in driveways, lights stayed off at night. Kids were scared of the lady in the sweater with the clipboard, but nobody expected things to escalate the way they did. One family, new to the block, put a single plastic pumpkin on their porch for their toddler. Nothing big, nothing flashy, just a happy orange pumpkin. But the moment Karen saw it, she stormed up their steps, banged on the door, and threatened them with a $500 non-compliance penalty, a penalty that didn't even exist. When they laughed it off, she snapped. She called the cops on a toddler's pumpkin, and when the officers arrived, what she did next changed everything. She claimed the family was endangering the community, that she had authority to enforce HOA law, and demanded the police remove the decorations by force. Even the cops stared at her like she'd lost her mind. But before they could finish shaking their heads, she pointed across the street, straight, at me and said we were all part of a dangerous rebellion and she would shut us all down. That was the moment we realized this wasn't about Halloween. This was about power, and she wasn't stopping anytime soon. But none of us knew the worst part yet. The secret, unlawful plan she had already set in motion behind our backs. A plan that would turn the entire neighborhood against her and force us into a confrontation no HOA had ever seen. And what happened when we uncovered it would force us to take a stand that even the police couldn't ignore. You'd think after the police dismissed her ridiculous complaint, she'd calm down. But no, Karen didn't retreat. She doubled down. The next morning, every mailbox in the neighborhood had a bright red notice stamped. Mandatory Community Morality Protocol. Effective immediately. The words alone were enough to drop jaws. But what was inside? That's when we realized she wasn't just extreme, she was dangerous. She outlined new HOA laws she invented overnight. No costumes, no yard decor, no music outdoors, no gatherings after 6 p.m., no dark-themed imagery, no children walking alone, and absolutely no Halloween candy distribution. It was like she was trying to erase the entire holiday from existence. And then the most insane part. Anyone who violated her rules would face property investigations, legal action, and forced board review. Nobody had ever heard anything like this. Our HOA didn't even have a legal team. She was fabricating authority out of thin air, hoping fear would keep everyone quiet. But she underestimated us. Later that afternoon, a group of neighbors, me included, formed an emergency meeting in my garage. People were shaking with anger. Parents were furious. Elderly residents were confused and scared. Someone pulled up the HOA bylaws and, unsurprisingly, nothing Karen was doing was legal. She didn't have the power to pass rules alone. She didn't have the right to impose fines. She didn't even have the right to cancel community events without a vote. So the neighborhood agreed. If she wanted a fight, she was getting one. We planned a special community-wide meeting to vote her out immediately. But before we could even finalize the date, Karen acted first. She went door to door with a camcorder, filming people's porches, demanding compliance, updates. She screamed at a teenager for having a bat sticker on his window. She told a single mom her orange porch bulb was spiritually toxic. And when anyone refused to talk to her, she wrote their address down like she was building some kind of blacklist. That evening, she escalated again, this time sending out a blast email accusing several families of satanic influence and threatening formal HOA intervention. It was absolute madness. Halloween week was turning into a war zone. But the turning point came when she confronted the Thompson family, an older couple who'd lived here for 40 years and never heard a soul. They had placed 2 tiny plastic ghosts on their mailbox. Karen marched right onto their lawn at 9 p.m. and started ripping the decorations, down with her bare hands. When Mr. Thompson asked her to stop, she screamed at him, accused him of corrupting the neighborhood, and shoved him. That's when someone finally snapped and called the police. Again. And this time, the officers weren't amused. They warned her she had no legal authority to enforce anything. No power to touch private property. No right to threaten residents. Her face twisted with rage, like she couldn't believe she wasn't in control anymore. But then she said something that chilled everyone within earshot. She told the police, "You don't understand. I already took steps to make sure this neighborhood obeys me whether they want to or not." None of us knew what she meant. Not yet. But the very next morning, we discovered exactly what steps she'd taken, something so illegal, so manipulative, and so explosive that it would force every resident to show up for the biggest, loudest, and most chaotic HOA showdown this neighborhood had ever seen. And she wasn't going down without a fight. By sunrise, the entire neighborhood knew something was horribly wrong. Phones buzzed nonstop, people stepping out onto porches, with the same stunned expression like we'd all woken up inside a nightmare we didn't sign up for. Karen's steps weren't just threats or warnings. She had taken her obsession to a level none of us imagined. Every single resident had received the same envelope taped to their door. Inside was a new HOA violation summary, claiming each household owed hundreds, some over $1,000, in behavior penalties. These fake violations included absurd lines like failure to promote moral compliance, permitting occult imagery, non-approved October, decorations, and even allowing minors to engage in ritual-themed costumes. She wasn't just banning Halloween anymore. She was trying to bankrupt the entire neighborhood. And then the final bombshell, a demand that all penalties be paid directly to her personal HOA enforcement office, which was just a P.O. box she opened the day before. It wasn't just crazy, it was fraud, full-blown criminal fraud. The rage that erupted was like nothing I'd ever seen. People gathered outside, waving the letters, shouting, demanding answers. Parents, grandparents, military veterans, new families. We were suddenly united by one thing. We were done being bullied. And that's when someone noticed something even worse. Karen had hired 2 private security guards, huge guys in black jackets, to stand outside the HOA office she'd set up in her garage. She put orange traffic cones blocking off half the road. She hung a giant sign that read, HOA Compliance Center, entry by authorization only. It looked less like a neighborhood garage and more like the entrance to a cult bunker. We knew we had to act fast. A group of us, nearly the entire street, marched toward her house to confront her. Kids watched from windows. Even the elderly brought lawn chairs because they knew something big was coming. When we reached her driveway, one of her hired guards stepped forward and told us we couldn't approach the building. It was insane. This was a quiet Georgia neighborhood, not a war zone. Someone called the police again, and within minutes, 3 squad cars rolled onto the street. This time, the officers didn't come to resolve a complaint. They came to investigate her. When the police confronted her about the fraudulent fines and the illegal security. "Checkpoint!" she exploded, screaming about corruption, immoral residents, and how she alone had the right to enforce order. People recorded everything. The officers tried to get her to calm down, but she was too far gone. She pointed at the crowd, accusing us of forming a satanic mob, and demanded the police arrest every single resident who refused. Compliance. The officers almost laughed in her face. But then she made a fatal mistake. She went into her garage, her so-called HOA headquarters, and came out holding a stack of documents. She claimed were official mandates, waving them like trophies. The police asked to see them. She refused. They asked again. She clutched the papers tighter. And when an officer reached out, she yanked them back and screamed, "These are classified HOA authority documents. I will not hand them over." That was it. The officers exchanged looks, stepped forward, and informed her she could now be detained for obstruction. Her hired guards backed away. Instantly. They weren't about to get arrested for her madness. Karen panicked, yelling about losing control, failed missions, and protecting the neighborhood from corruption. But there was no saving her. As the officers moved in to detain her, one document slipped from her grip and fell to the ground. And when a neighbor picked it up, what we saw written inside changed everything we thought we knew about her motives and revealed the shocking truth behind why she was so desperate to ban Halloween at any cost. The moment the meeting erupted into shouting, I felt the air in that cramped clubhouse thicken like a storm closing in. People who had lived side by side for decades were suddenly standing, pointing, demanding answers, demanding justice, demanding their neighborhood back. And right there in the middle of it all stood the HOA president, smiling like she was watching a victory she hadn't earned. But the hook came fast. The elderly neighbors who rarely spoke stood up, together. And for the first time all night, she looked shaken. I watched her eyes dart around the room as a petition was set on the table, signatures already filling half the page. Her face twitched in panic, and suddenly she tried to regain control, shouting that Halloween was a threat to the soul of the community, that we were all blind to evil, and that she alone had the moral authority to protect us. But her voice cracked, and everyone could hear it. She could feel her power slipping right out of her hands. She grabbed her phone, threatening the room again. But this time, the neighbors didn't flinch. They were done being intimidated. When the police officer arrived, he didn't even step fully inside before raising his eyebrows. "Ma'am, you can't call 911 because people disagreed with you." Her face collapsed. The room went silent. And just like that, the officer asked if anyone else needed help. No one did. The neighbors simply pointed to the petition. Minutes later, she stormed out, furious and humiliated, trying to hold on to whatever scraps of authority she thought she had left. The petition passed unanimously. By sunrise, she had listed her home for sale. 2 weeks later, she was gone. But the story didn't end with her departure, because the community met again, this time with an elderly neighbor stepping forward as the new president. He spoke softly but with strength, announcing 3 new rules. The HOA president could never again cancel events without a community vote. Terms would last 2 years maximum, and minor violations could no longer be punished with fines. The room erupted in applause, and for the first time in months, the neighborhood felt like itself again. But here's the part that surprised me most. As everyone filtered out, laughing, hugging, relieved, I realized how close we had come to losing the very spirit that made this place home. Halloween lights were already appearing on porches. Kids were already planning their costumes. And the neighborhood, our neighborhood, felt alive again. And if you want more real HOA battles, real drama, real stories the HOAs don't want you to hear, you already know who's telling them. This is Behind the Hedges, and this story is just the beginning.